Yo, what's going on, Titan Clan? It is your boy King Titan X here, back with another video. And as you guys can see from the thumbnail, it's going to be the next part of what if Deku had Terra's powers. Now, things are going to be interesting in this part because of the fact that we can actually get past to the USJ. We can actually make it to the USJ. That's where things get interesting. But first, we would need to establish like that whole student council part of the what if. Basically, most of the things go pretty similar to in canon. Most of the people just vote for Deku. Most people a lot more people actually end up voting for Deku here. Like, I would say like it's twice the amount. So basically 8 people voted for Deku here, including himself. Besides that, what else we would need to establish here is the fact that Shinso is now part of Class 1A. He actually ended up getting transferred to Class 1A after Mineta left after like the battle trial arc. Basically, today was his first day in Class 1A, so he's basically just getting himself acquainted with everybody else. But that's basically how it goes for that part of the event. What ends up changing here is that really nothing much really changes, to be honest. I would say like the only thing that really changes is the fact that like when it comes on to that stampede that happens later on, Deku is able to actually use his abilities more and basically help stop the crowd a bit more. But even then, like, most of these kids have quirks, so I say most, but basically a lot of these kids have quirks that can actually be really strong if they used it properly. So simply put, those walls of earth he tried making were pretty ineffective in the long run, unfortunately. The next thing that would probably change is the USJ. This is where things get interesting. I just skimmed through most of the events because I want to reach this point. Because this is where things get interesting. I keep on saying interesting, but it's like this. Terra is here. Yeah, you heard me right. So what ended up happening was that well, basically when it came on to Alpha 1, he was actually interested in looking at some of the potential successors of All Might, potential successors of One for All. Obviously, he actually ends up encountering Mirio, and he actually ends up encountering Deku as well, and his list of potential candidates that could actually have One for All in the future. He's not too sure right now if All Might has actually passed on his quirk to anybody, but if he has, he's looking between those two. Those two have very powerful quirks, but with Deku especially, his quirk reminded him of somebody that made waves in America, and even made some waves in Japan as well. Terra. Yeah, like that villain Terra. He remembered her. She had a very, very powerful quirk that he actually wanted to get his hands on, but unfortunately she ended up going to Tartarus to spend the rest of her days there, but he realized how much of a waste that would have been. So he basically had it to where Kurogiri, he basically ended up looking for, well, Tartarus. He ended up getting information from a couple others, quite a few others. It took a while, but Alpha 1 managed to get some connections in place in order to help guide Kurogiri to Tartarus in order to actually get Terra. So yeah, that basically happens. What ends up happening with their whole interaction is that Kurogiri just wipes her away from the prison cell. and like the alarm start roaring up, but it's already too late. Kurogiri has basically already teleported Terra to Alpha One space, and she actually is confronted by Alpha One, saying that, hey, here's the thing, you have a very powerful quirk, and you are very skilled in it. You are Terra. I actually know you from like your stories in America, and you don't have to fret. I'm not going to try and take your quirk or anything. I'm not going to do anything that's really bad. More so, I'm just asking for a favor here. I heard that you had a son over this time, but, or at least like you were found to be pregnant or something, which is very interesting. So I'm curious to know, is this your son? He actually ends up finding a few pictures of Azuku from basically just anywhere, really. Like, with all the connections that Alpha One has, it's not unlikely for him to have actually gotten some photos of some of the UA students, especially during that whole ruckus, and it also helped with the fact that he did have a spy among Class 1A. He had a spy among Class 1A, I think you all can figure it out, being Agakure Toru. She was basically able to fill out being Alpha One spy here, and was actually able to relay information to Alpha One. What ended up happening is that Terra would look through the pictures and she would actually start to tear up because of the fact that he looks so much like her. He even had the blonde hair. He even had the blonde hair just like her. Like, a mother would be able to recognize their kid even after like a couple of years of not seeing them, or in her case, basically 16 years of not being able to see Azuku. Like, sure, it hurt, but at the same time, she was happy to see something of her child. She was actually glad to see she was actually glad to see a picture of her son, even if he looks so different from when he was a baby. And she never really got to build a connection with him, and that's what she wanted to do here. She wanted to actually be a bit of a mother figure here, but unfortunately with all of her crimes back then, it was going to be hard. Especially now that she was basically on the run right now, so she basically had to look to Alpha One for help. She realized that she was basically like a dog eating out of Alpha One's hand at this point. And she despised that. She didn't want to be in this sort of compromise at all. But at the same time, she really didn't have much of a choice. So she had to listen to what Alpha One said. And she ended up having to go to USJ with a couple other villains. A whole group of villains, actually. Some of them actually recognized her and would immediately step back in fear because they know how powerful she is. Shigaraki wouldn't really care much about her, thinking that she was just another random villain that was picked up because he didn't really know much about her, honestly. Even if he did, he didn't really care because he still saw that Alpha One was like the most powerful out of everybody. So he didn't really have a need to be scared of her. On top of that, he also had the Nomu as well. He was pretty sure that the Nomu would be able to actually fight for him, actually protect him, if she actually decided to go rogue on him. So regardless, he was safe. He had absolutely no reason to be scared of her. And that wasn't the same for the rest of the villains. So everybody ended up going through the warp gate. They actually made it to the USJ. And they would just be waiting for Class 1A to appear. Meanwhile, with Class 1A, they were on the bus. They were actually talking amongst each other, and some other kids actually questioned Izuku about his quirk. What exactly can he do? And Izuku just explains that he basically has a geokinesis quirk. He's basically able to manipulate like like the earth element, and basically able to also manipulate anything regarding the earth as well. So crystal, steel, basically metals and all of that. Like when it comes down to metals, he can manipulate that. When it comes down to crystals, he can manipulate that. Anything that comes from the earth, essentially, like the earth's crust and all of that, he can manipulate that. At least he thinks so. It's just that some of them take more focus than others. Some are more strenuous than others. He can actually make animated creatures if he wanted, but those are kind of actually very hard to make, honestly. It takes a lot of effort for him to make such a thing. But Class 1A is pretty amazed by this quirk. Although Bakugo is having a sour face because of the fact that Zuko actually defeated him in the battle trial arc. Everybody says that this quirk is so flashy, but at the same time reminds them of a certain villain from way back in the day. As Zuko starts to sweat nervously, thinking that the same interaction will happen with when he was a little kid back in the orphanage, but they decide to dismiss it, making Zuko actually feel relieved here. When they go into the USJ, Zuko immediately feels like a wave of energy that just doesn't seem right. He feels that there's something off throughout all of 13's speech. And what ends up happening is that Zuko is actually right in feeling that, because next thing you know, boom, the warp gate opens up and every villain just starts popping out. At first, the students are thinking, hey, maybe these are just like props. Maybe these are like some paid actors or something. We wouldn't really put it against UAE to make such a thing. Because like they literally had robots, gigantic robots in the entrance exam. So they didn't doubt UA's funding or could afford that. They believed that these guys were basically loaded at this point. That's basically how it was for Class 1A in the beginning, until Aizawa literally told them that, hey, no, these are actual villains. I actually give you consent to fight here, so get on guard. But unfortunately, when it came on to people like Bakugo and Kirishima, they were a bit too headstrong, and they ended up compromising the whole of Class 1A, causing most of them to actually be warped to different places within the USJ. Now here we don't have Mineta, but we do have Shinso. And so what ends up happening is that Shinso will actually use this quirk in order to actually brainwash some of the villains. And when it comes down to Izuku, he's able to use this quirk in order to actually get the sea floor to be manipulated. And basically, he knows that there is something at the very bottom of the sea, and basically that ocean area and that shipwreck area, and he even has it too where the ship actually starts to be manipulated as well. Well, not really, I take that back. But what ends up happening is that Izuku actually manipulates the earth that is underneath the water to actually capture the villains here, since he doesn't necessarily have one for all, but he does have a very, very strong geokinesis quirk. The next thing that happens though is that Deku, Tsuyu, and Shinso, they actually all make it to the seashore. They actually start observing the fight between Aizawa and the multiple villains. They actually see just how good Aizawa is in combat. Like, most of these villains are used to using their quirks, so when it came on to how Aizawa literally had the ability to take that ability away from them, it's literally like they just lost everything. They just lost how to fight, really. So Aizawa is basically fighting a whole bunch of novices here, and Aizawa is basically just playing with these guys at this point until the Nomu comes in and is immediately able to just and to just end Aizawa's whole career here. What ends up happening is that Aizawa, he isn't prepared for the Nomu to have actually been able to, bypass his erasure quirk. More so the fact that this creature actually had an immense amount of natural strength, despite the fact that he erased his quirks. Because of the fact that he actually glanced at him. He actually looked at the creature as well when he was erasing quirks, so he didn't understand at first until he realized that, oh my goodness, this is actual power. This is something unusual. The whole creature actually looked unusual to Aizawa in the beginning. What made things even worse was when Shigaraki came along. Like, he realized that the three were there as well, and he actually tried to, put his hand towards Tsuyu's face in order to basically decay her whole body, but Aizawa didn't want that to happen. He couldn't afford for that to happen, and he tried to erase. He actually ended up erasing Shigaraki's quirk here, thankfully. Although Shigaraki looked back and was actually kind of impressed with Aizawa's pure will, and basically has a Nomu, punch his face into the wall again. Not the wall, but the ground, I mean. Izuku refused to let that happen and basically opened up a hole right underneath the Nomu. The Nomu actually fell and was sealed within the ground. Something that was actually something that Shigaraki was not accounting for. He was actually surprised at just how easily Izuku was able to do such a thing. He was amazed and angry at the same time. He went in and actually tried to fight Izuku. He actually tried to attack Izuku, but unfortunately with him, Terra actually sees this. She recognizes the boy with blonde hair and green tips, green highlights as her son. And she even recognizes the quirk as well. She was actually happy at the fact that she knows now that Izuku actually not only gained her appearance, but also her quirk as well. She was relieved that he didn't get his father's quirk. That bastard of a father. She was angry at Hasashi. She was hurt as well. She honestly didn't think she could ever truly love a person like. She honestly didn't think she could love again after all that Hasashi put her through, and was the one to actually throw her in Tartarus as well. That was probably one of the things that hurt the most. So what ends up happening is that she actually ends up stopping. She stops Shigaraki from, basically turning her son into dust by literally throwing a boulder at Shigaraki. Shigaraki is surprised and looks at her. He's like, I thought we were on the same team. What are you doing? She says that, here's the thing. You don't harm my kid. You don't just do that. So as soon as you try to harm my kid, as soon as you try to touch my kid, all bets are off, honestly. Like, this whole alliance thing, you are about to kill him. I can't have that happening. And Shigaraki realizes that, yeah, he did actually mess up there. He got a bit too cocky. And he tries to apologize, but it's already too late. Because she is just using her geokinesis. She is going full power here. She actually ends up making animated creatures, basically like that cinder block creature from the Teen Titans series. Basically, she ends up making that, and basically has them go at Shigaraki. She makes she makes a couple. She makes about like 5 of them, and basically has them go at the rest of the villains as well. She's actually kind of drained from this, but at the same time relieved to know that her son is alright. Izuku is looking at this woman like, who is she? And he realizes that she has a similar quirk to him. A similar geokinesis quirk that even works the same as well, so he's interested in finding out more about her. Ame actually arrives sometime later and sees that most of the villains are already subdued. Unfortunately, the Nomu was actually able to break out just right then and there. But at the very least, Ame doesn't have to worry about wasting his energy on fighting the rest of the villains. He doesn't have to worry about capturing the rest of the villains here. It also helped with the fact that other heroes arrived as well. And they all see Terra. And they all want to go and capture her, bring her back to Tartarus. But Izuku actually stops them from doing so. He basically puts his hands in front of them, saying that, hey, here's the thing, she actually protected us. She is not a threat to you guys. I don't see her as a villain. You guys may want to reconsider this. The hero's trying to move Izuku aside, thinking that he's just delusional or something. But other students actually go up in and defend her. She actually did save them. She actually saved quite a few of them. If it weren't for those cinder block creatures, they didn't know where they would be right now, because some of them were in quite a bit of a predicament. They were happy to know that, well, they were saved. Although by this weird woman, she was a villain. They didn't understand that part. It was confusing to say at the very least. They didn't understand how she could be a villain but at the same time save them. They thought that she was with the League of Villains. And they didn't understand why she was helping them. And so basically that's what ends up happening. The heroes decide to reconsider things, and they basically decide, you know what, we'll still capture her. We're still going to arrest her, but we're going to reconsider her sentencing. We're going to look back into her case again, because more information about her life has actually popped up, and we may actually put it into like one of those reconciliation programs. Basically one of those community programs. I don't know what the name of it is, but basically it's this sort of program they're thinking of doing where villains can actually get a second chance at life. They'll just have to go through like a lot of time. They'll have to go through a couple years maybe of basically becoming better people, really. And that's what they're considering doing with Terra here. Anyways, that's all I have right now for the USJ. So when it comes on to the sports festival, most of the things will go pretty similar, with like the classes bumping into class 1A. Most of the kids would think that, oh, you guys think you're so special because you fought villains. Well, guess what? We're going to actually be the ones to take over this sports festival. We're going to show them who's really boss. And Izuku just doesn't really care here. Shinso is part of class 1A here, so he doesn't really say much. He just says that, hey, get out of my way, please. And some of them are like, what? And they're already caught in Shinso's brainwashing quirk. So that's basically what ends up happening. The last thing that ends up happening is that Tetsu and Monoma would actually speak up here, saying that Class 1A would bow down to Class 1B's feet during the sports festival, all of that good stuff, really. At the very end, what ends up happening is that when it comes on to that whole interaction with Izuku and with Izuku and Shoto. That goes pretty similar to in canon, where Shoto challenges Izuku, thinking that he's stronger than him, but Izuku doesn't believe that Shoto is actually stronger than himself here. And he's actually been trained under his mother and using his powers now. He's actually happy to have a mother in his life, a real mother, not like this hero safety public commission training him throughout his life. Those weren't really parental figures. Those were basically kind of cold-hearted people, really. They basically kind of trained him to basically do anything in order to get the job done. And he absolutely hated that, honestly. He kind of disliked the Hero Public Safety Commission, but at the same time, he had to respect them. Hero Safety Public Commission, whatever. Yeah. Izuku actually has a mother here. She's actually trying to catch up on a whole bunch of lost time, even though she's not allowed to see him for too long. And she's still under UA's watch. She's still under the watch of the police and the government in general. Because if she makes one wrong move, she's getting sent straight back to Tartarus. The only reason why she hasn't gone back to Tartarus yet right now is because of the fact that she actually helped out at the USJ by protecting all of the students. And the government is saying, you know what, we may actually have misjudged her character. She may actually be a good person at heart, but at the same time, she still did many atrocious acts. So at the very least, we're probably going to see what she's going to do for right now. We're going to see what she'll do for right now, and we can maybe work things out. Maybe give her a reduced sentence or something. Because I believe I gave her like life in part 0 or something. But yeah, that's basically how I'm going to end it off for right now. King Titan X out.